Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Under the Gold Dome. This is our third episode this session, and it's going to be a pretty interesting conversation today. We have some very involved individuals with us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Why don't we start with you?
Thank you for having me, first of all. My name is Nelly Miles. I am employed by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and I serve in the capacity of the Director of Public Affairs.
Thank you for having me as well. I'm Tamiko Lowry-Pugh, founder of the Still Standing Foundation, where we focus on domestic violence advocacy, awareness, and prevention. I'm also one of the field reps or legislative advocates for Marcy's Law for Georgia, which is a equal rights for crime victims bill.
Okay.
I'm Dar'shun Kendrick, representative for State House District 93, which is East DeKalb and South Gwinnett, and the sponsor of HB 662, which is a sexual misconduct bill.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shay'na Fields, and I will be representing the millennial perspective on everything that we'll be talking about today.
Hello, I'm State Representative Doreen Carter. I represent House District 92, which is parts of DeKalb and Rockdale, and I'm actually chairing the Domestic Violence Committee of the Minority Caucus, and I am the co-sponsor of HB 522.
And as I said, I'm State Representative Roger Bruce. I represent District 61, which is Fulton County, Douglas County, and Cobb County. And we're going to jump right into this. This is obviously a topic that is sensitive to all of us. I lived through a period of time in Atlanta's history when we dealt with missing and murdered children under Maynard Jackson's when he was the mayor. And it was a terrible time in Atlanta for that. And but it seemed like every single day there was something on the news about a child being taken, and a lot of those probably haven't even been solved yet, and that was years and years ago. And then after they identified who they thought was the perpetrator in those murders, it just stopped being reported. We didn't hear anything about it. And now it appears that the topic has come back because I don't know that it ever really stopped. They just stopped reporting it. So why don't we just talk about the different bills that are being introduced on these topics and why you are introducing these bills. What is it that has come to your attention, and where did it come from to get us to this point now? You want to start with you, Doreen?
Oh, sure. Thank you. And interestingly enough, I think I was either junior or a senior in high school when I grew up in Atlanta as well, and it was definitely one of those times that made all of us very uncomfortable, and at least one of the young men actually went to school with us. Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing that. You're right. So the bill that I'm co-sponsoring actually is domestic violence related, where it's called the Helping Hands Act, and the goal of this bill is to have a class where individuals in the beauty industry will take a class to be able to identify signs of domestic violence. And the way the bill is constructed now, it would actually be a class that they could use as their continuing education. I would like to point out that where we want the folk in the beauty industry to be able to help identify, there is no mandatory reporting on a particular bill, but we felt like this was an area where if there are men or women that needed help and didn't really have a way to get out or didn't feel comfortable, they at least have someone that could be looking out for them, that could help them singling through that, or actually add some direction. And I think it's important because we meet constituents and we have friends and family members that have found themselves in unhealthy relationships, and they stay in them sometimes because they really just don't know how to get out, or they don't feel like maybe they have someone that they could lean on. Their circle may be small, and I think this would be a way to help us, because a lot of us go to the hair salon, we go to the barbershop, and this is the place where people feel most comfortable. So we think it was a good avenue.
And there's a link, because we're going to talk about two topics today, actually. The missing, the kids that are disappearing, and then the kids that are getting beat up at home, and the domestic violence. There is a nexus. The two things do connect.
Yes.
And you have what does your bill do? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so HB 62 is my sexual misconduct bill. So what this bill does essentially is it would require training from an institute that would be set up, and all the legislators, all of us would go through this training either at biennial or offered at another time, specifically related to sexual misconduct. And I make the distinction between sexual harassment and sexual misconduct because, of course, there's a bill on the Senate side that specifically talks about sexual harassment, but sexual harassment is only a form of conduct or inappropriate conduct between an employer and employee. It has a very specific legal meaning. So my bill expands it so that if I have a colleague, somebody I don't have an employer-employee relationship but still has inappropriate conduct, then they would fall under, whatever ethics rules pertain to that. So that's what this bill is aimed to do, is to make sure that legislators understand what sexual misconduct is so that we can be the leaders in the state on that issue.
Okay. And so it sounds like we have 3 topics. And because on this side, we're talking about...
On this side, we're talking about equal rights for crime victims.
Okay. So why don't we hear what you have to say?
Absolutely. So Marcy's Law for Georgia is a bill that will provide equal rights for crime victims. Currently in the state of Georgia, we're one of 15 states that does not protect crime victims constitutionally, but we protect the accused.
Okay.
And so when you have situations like domestic violence or children that are missing because of human trafficking and things like that, when they go through the judicial system, they feel like they're being re-victimized again because they don't really have those constitutional rights to protect them. And so that's what Marcy's Law for Georgia will do.
Okay. So the commonality in all this, and I know you're with the GBI, and you guys investigate a lot of this stuff that we're talking about.
That's right.
And I know you're restricted on some of the things you can say and what you can't say because of the role, but how is the GBI addressing the issues that have just been brought up?
Well, for our agency, I think that one thing that is important to make sure we're aware of is that crimes against children are a top priority for the agency. When it comes to cases that involve human trafficking investigations, one thing that I think has been very, very beneficial, and we have to say thank you to the legislature, is that in 2011, we passed a law that gave our agency the ability to have original jurisdiction in human trafficking cases. And so that gave us the opportunity to go out and leverage the resources. And so because we are smaller, we rely on our local agencies. So Atlanta Police Department, DeKalb Police Department, some of these local agencies that we work with, we can go out there and go after the cases. I think that where we really find issue and we take issue is that when it comes to some of these crimes against children, in some areas, I feel like people just don't really want to talk about it. We will talk about other things, or if it's not happening to your child, then it's almost like it doesn't exist. But as we were talking about earlier, it really takes a community. And I think that when it comes to law enforcement, it's important that we in law enforcement know those signs and we have the training. And so I think for us, that's a big focus. Unfortunately, with domestic violence issues, our agencies, we are not first responders. So when you call 911, GBI is not coming. However, we come when it's too late. And that is when
What does that mean when it's too late?
When it's too late, we have to, first of all, by law, we have to be called in by a local agency. So the sheriff or a police department or district attorney has to invite us in. And so when I say it's too late, that means a death has occurred. We just had a case that was actually very heartbreaking because one of our coworkers knew this woman. It was a domestic violence situation where it ended up being an officer-involved shooting. As you know, the GBI, we kind of have a reputation of policing the police, so we get called in. But it was in Rockdale County where essentially a sheriff's office came to the house. Woman runs out and runs past, and you probably saw this on the news, runs past the sheriff's office. Man runs after her, guns her down, and kills her.
In front of the police?
The police actually lost them.
Wow.
They took off running, and that's really hard. Those police officers are going to have a lot to kind of just deal with. But I guess the point of the matter is when we get called in, eventually there was an exchange of gunfire between the officers as well as the person that ended up getting arrested and charged with this. But in those cases, like I said, it's too late. It's past the time. So unfortunately, we can't really we're not doing a whole lot on our end because of the roles in prevention. But when it comes to the human trafficking issues, because we do have that ability to have that stand-up, ability to go out there and work those cases, we're able to do that. And we have a lot of partners that are not even law enforcement as well that we work with on the prevention side and the restoring side for the children.
Okay. I think what we have in common in all of these situations is that somebody is being victimized by somebody who has power and authority over them in some way or another. And that seems to be what the common thread is between the three topics that you are dealing with. The human trafficking one is of serious attention for me because, like I said, I lived through that and I saw it. And a lot of those kids were your age, and some of them were younger. What is the thought for your age group on how to deal with all of this?
The thought on how to deal with all of this really isn't something that's talked about amongst the millennials a lot, as much as we talk about police brutality, as much as we talk about the current social justice issues. But one thing that I love to emphasize on is the fact that we need to pay attention and become more self-aware of issues that may not make the trending topic on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. And this is one of them. This has to do with our little sisters. This has to do with our little brothers. This has to do with family members. And we need to reach out and we need to actually do some research and do some looking around and see how we can help, see how we can use our social media platform to look for these missing kids or to connect, which is something that I see often. I see them say, hey, so-and-so's sister is missing, so let's repost to try to find. But what could we do to take a little step further? I think we could link with these other organizations that are trying to help those who have been affected or been victims of domestic violence, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and different things as far as human sex trafficking. And I think that we can find ways to help them and partner their influence with our influence, the millennial influence.
Okay.
Yeah.
On that same topic. So as a mom of millennials, so one of the things that's very concerning and just a lot of the research and some of the knowledge that we're learning about sex trafficking and kids coming up missing, they're using the music industry. They're using that because a lot of the young folk now they wanna make it, and so they're putting their music out. They're using social media and they're connecting with people who they don't know, and they're meeting up with them. And you think you are coming to meet with someone that wants to produce your music, and it's someone who has tricked you into going with it, and you find yourself being sex trafficked. And these are the kind of things, to your point, you guys aren't talking about it because you all are telling mom and dad it'll never happen to me. You're just, you don't understand. And so I think we do. It would be helpful as a mom to have people like you, millennials that are leaders, start talking about hey, think twice before you're responding on social media. Think 3 times before you go and meet with someone, and work with your parents. There are people, the parents want you to make it, but I think that's one of the things. And back to the, with the sex trafficking, we did this tour over the summer where we went out in a van, and it was like a live tour, and the enactment of it was just unbelievable. How easy it was to get someone in the life. They're in our neighborhoods. We went through this just a regular neighborhood, and the other thing the guy pointed out was, he said, you notice how everybody's blinds are closed. We pulled up at this house in a van, went through the garage. Nobody would have ever known it. We had just walked into a house. It was an enactment where people were being sex trafficked in this home. So there are a lot of things that's going on around sex trafficking and some of the domestic violence. There are things that's going on, and the young people are ignoring because your mind is what you're trying to do, and you're missing that there are people out here that really want to hurt you. We want you guys to feel free and all of that, but we need for y'all to also be careful, because you guys are the masters on this social media. But I just wanted to chime in right there. Or something.
Sounds like you going to say something too. Go ahead.
I do just very quickly. The other thing is that the trend now is everybody's an Instagram model, and so all the Instagram models are able to date the celebrities and the basketball players. And so what's happening is they have these ads online that say, "Hey, do you want to make money like the Instagram models do? Come to this job interview, and then when you get there, it's a pimp."
Yes.
And now you're stuck. And so the other thing that they're doing is giving out these, I learned this in the class last week on human trafficking.
Yeah.
So there are
Wow.
these tennis bracelets that they're giving out, and the tennis bracelets actually have tracking devices in them.
Wow.
So if they try to get away or, tell somebody something, they'll actually come and get them. And so now they're even in more trouble. So if you see these tennis bracelets, kind of be leery, and especially if she's 13, 14, "Hey, sweetie, where'd you get that bracelet from?"
Tennis
And-
bracelets?
Yeah.
What do they
And
look
you
like?
can look in a person's face if they feel nervous. If you say, "Hey, where'd you get that tennis bracelet from?" I had a lady last week that said she was actually able to rescue a young lady from Walmart because she knew the sign. And she was with an older man, and it looked odd. And she said, "Where'd you get that tennis bracelet?" And she looked afraid. And so she reported it to the Walmart security.
So what does a tennis bracelet look like?
A diamond tennis bracelet, just a diamond tennis bracelet, and it has like a bigger diamond on it, which is the actual tracking
Tracker.
device.
Oh my God.
Wow,
That's interesting because especially we're talking about the bill that we have with training the folk in the beauty industry be to identify domestic violence. We might need to add that track in there.
Absolutely,
So,
identifying human trafficking.
Representative, thank you because I know we had these three topics, but they are
But
definitely
they all
linking
con- that's-
because we've
that's
got to
right.
help. We have
Because
got to
while you're
help
getting
them.
your hair done, it could be a little girl in there getting her hair done for her pimp. I mean, you
Yes.
just don't know.
Right. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
So it all
I
comes
thought
together.
I thought they were all linked together, but you bringing it together. But the
Yeah, like
reality
literally.
is that are you seeing an increase in these three issues?
I mean, I will definitely say yes on that, and some of it is we're not probably where we need to be with the awareness, but I know for us, just making cases because we are, like you said, working on knowing the signs, knowing what to look for. Now, law enforcement, they know these signs, so just to keep in mind with human trafficking. In terms of just trafficking in general and the illicit trade, human trafficking is number 2 now in the world. And you talk about trafficking behind drugs.
Is it more prevalent here in the Atlanta
Yeah.
metro area and other places?
We keep hearing about Atlanta being the hub, and I know there's been, whenever I go to these forums, there's back and forth kind of controversy about, is Atlanta truly the hub? But I will tell you that we have a lot going on in
Is that
Atlanta.
what drives people to that?
Well,
here?
Atlanta is just easy. It's easy to access. It's easy to get to, and the highway system, the infrastructure, it
And the
just makes
airport, I
it.
suspect.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing also, when you were, mentioning the different signs, I think, with the legislation that's out there that really promotes, knowing these signs is very beneficial because we do overlook it. But something to also think about is that, what did we just have here, a few weeks ago? The college football playoffs. We've got NCAA coming. We've got Super Bowl. Those are high times for
Yes.
trafficking. And so
Yes.
there are all sorts of internal plans that we're having to make because of these events. I mean, safety is, of course, very important in all of these other things and making sure the state's business is good, but it also draws those perpetrators to our state.
And I know, we've talked about, the domestic violence, we've talked about the sex trafficking. You're more focused on issues related between employer and employee.
Well, no. The Senate bill is mine is sexual misconduct. Period. So it's so you don't have to have that employer relationship. But to your point, it still is talking about somebody that is either in a position of power or thinks that they're in a position of power, and they're doing something of a sexual nature that you don't want to happen to you.
Give us an example of what you're talking about. The others are very obvious. Give us an example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, and there's a lot of not to be technical, because there are a lot of circumstantial things that can lead to sexual harassment. But some of the most obvious ones would be touching a woman in inappropriate areas, or asking them to come back to a hotel room with you, or doing whistling. I mean, those are sort of the obvious signs that you see about.
But are we talking about that in a global context? You know, because you see it, ladies walking down the street, bunch of guys sitting there talking to each other, and the lady walks by and somebody says something off the wall.
Yeah, and that is why I said it's really you have to look at the whole circumstances. So I don't want to say it's just one thing, but for example, inappropriate touching somebody without their permission, period, is always going to be
Right.
a no. So that's sort of the most obvious ones. And then when it comes to verbal things, of course, context is very, very important. But I tell people if it's something you wouldn't be comfortable doing in front of your mother or your wife or whatever, then chances are you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Right, or having somebody touch your wife, your daughter,
Right,
or whatever.
right.
Yeah, and I've got 2 daughters and a wife, and I understand.
Yeah.
I do.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I say. I had to put my martial arts together. But it's a scary thought. The whole concept of anybody being subject to being harassed or in some way harmed because they are less able to protect themselves than the perpetrator. And that's what, as I said, that's what all of these topics seem to have in common. What is it that we can do, as people look at this video and they hear about these 3 things, what can people do to help you protect them?
The biggest thing we look for is that community support, the reporting. I was at a forum I said earlier yesterday, and one stat really stood out in my mind. The average age that a child that lives after they've been introduced to the environment is 5 to 7 years afterwards. That's the average time frame. And so I think the prevention is so key, because we know that once you get introduced and you're in the life and trying to come out of it, how difficult it is. And then you start having these other tangents with, drug issues and, all kinds of things. So I think that, knowing the signs and reporting it is going to be very key.
And when you say reporting it how?
You report it to your local law enforcement. That's the best way. You can certainly contact the GBI, but our agency is completely tied in. There's a task force. Again, I said HB 200, 2011. I mean, that saved our lives when it comes to this topic. And that agency, our agency, again, works with the locals. It's called the ICAC Task Force, Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. So we deal with a lot of child exploitation, computer crimes, which, as we know, computer crimes, I mean, that's how a lot gets started, a lot of the internet crimes. And I must plug, we do have a GBI bill that we hope that will make it over to this side. Right now it's in the Senate, that will prevent the non-disclosure of administrative subpoena information. I was just telling Representative Kendrick earlier, right now with the internet service providers, if we have a target of an online child investigation, they will notify our target and say, okay, we've asked for a subpoena, so what does that do to our investigation? It blows our investigation. But they said if there's a state law in place, and they won't do that. And the number of child exploitation investigations that we are dealing with right now they're just astronomical. And a lot of them, they happen, I won't name the websites, but definitely social media, and there's specific websites that put up ads. And one thing I will say I love about Georgia is Georgia doesn't care. If you're going online and you're purchasing sex, they don't care that you don't know that it's a child. Georgia says, it's okay, sorry. You're still going to be held accountable. So like our state laws definitely mirror the federal laws, but I will say in our state, we are progressive, and we're doing really well when we overhauled the legislation. But again, back to your original question, knowing the signs, reporting it to local law enforcement so that way they can get plugged in. There's an organization called NCMEC. It's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and we work with them and we get so many tips. I can't even tell you. I feel sorry for the manager because there's the number of tips that come through, and there's so many tips that we get that we'll go after. And so there are a lot of different ways, but I think if anybody that's out there that's listening and they want to get involved, I think the big thing is to go and research the different organizations in your area that's working in that subject, and just get plugged in and just start where you are and do something.
Okay.
So I was going to I know we don't want to talk about that particular website or the websites because every time they take them down, they come back up. But one of the things that has happened over the last couple of years, American Express no longer allows their card members to make purchases
Okay.
on those sites. But what the trend, and you can validate, the trend was going to, they were starting to use Bitcoins. And so now there's a lot of different things that's going on in
The
the
dark
background.
web.
Yes,
They
in the
always
dark
think it's
web.
very
And so
innovative.
now, okay, we may not be able to use our debit cards, but we can use the Bitcoin. So I don't know, that may be something we need to explore around
Yeah, I know
Georgia.
somebody that's heavy into this Bitcoin thing. Maybe we'll get him here and,
Right.
and we'll talk about that.
Right, how they're using it.
Yeah.
Yes, and I was going to tell you the one of the other things in this human trafficking is happening right under our noses. Like there's a particular hotel that you drive along, I drive by every day. Would have never thought about it. We took this tour along the hot spots for sex trafficking, and it was like one of the hot spots. And they were telling us they bring these girls there, and a lot of them have had issues at home. It takes us back to the domestic violence. They're runaways, and they get picked up. They'll take them out to some of these hotels. For us, right along I-20, I was surprised that Rockdale had a huge issue. DeKalb has a huge issue. And then they're saying they'll take these girls from these little horrible hotels, clean them up, put some makeup on them, then bring them downtown to the Ritz. So it's happening all in Georgia. So we've got to figure out some kind of way how to help. It's not just young girls, it's young girls and boys. And I think the more we have these kind of talks,
Right.
the more we have awareness, the more people know what signs to look for, the more we can look at legislation. And in Georgia, there has been quite a bit. And I know one of the things that they were talking about as far as the human trafficking was starting to see how can we address the demand. Because really, if there wasn't a huge demand, we wouldn't have the supply issue. So I think we've gotten where we've stopped criminalizing the victims, but now we've got to strengthen the laws around the users.
Right.
So.
I wanted
Okay.
to say something really
Yeah.
fast. So, I've always wanted to put my hand into supporting and helping to fight against human sex trafficking and little girls and little boys who go through those issues and who are in that arena. But I know I'm a little afraid, and I'm like, I don't want to. What if I get targeted? Like, those are some of the things that come through my mind. Like, what if something happens to me while I'm out here taking this bold risk to fight for this cause? Like, what do you say to people like that who are kind of straddling the fence? Like, I want to do something, but I'm a little scared because I want to be protected at the same time.
I think part of that is not to do it by yourself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You're not going to be going into the houses by yourself.
Am I going in the houses? Is that how it does?
We can talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Start low. Okay.
Yeah. As I say, bottom line, don't do any of that by yourself,
Right.
for one thing.
Right.
And, I remember my daughter was getting ready to take a trip down to Cuba. And, and the only thing that kept coming to my mind was that movie, Taken.
Takers.
You remember the movie Taken?
Taken.
That, and I kept saying, okay, I got to go to the gym. I got to go to the gym. I got to do the workout. I got to get ready because I got to go down to Cuba to get my child back. I got to be ready. So, but I'm just saying, I'm saying that in jest, but the reality is that there are people, and you need to surround yourself with people that are willing to work on this topic, but work together. You cannot do this by yourself, and don't put yourself at risk, by doing that. Get somebody to go with you. We're gonna, wrap it up in a second here, but why don't, what is the message that you want to get out on what you're doing that we have not given you a chance to get out here?
No, I think everything that we've been talking about kind of really fits with the equal rights for crime victims. Representative Carter mentioned, the victim is being arrested, right? So that goes back into equal rights for crime victims, even though they may be a victim. They're actually a victim of the crime, but they're being arrested when you think about human
Victimized
trafficking.
twice.
So what about the pimp, and what about the person, what do you call the person that's buying it, the John? Is that what they're, so what about the John and what about the pimp? And so then you have jails full of young girls who are
Yeah, a couple people in
victims,
this room
and
named
they're
John,
being,
you know,
no offense if your name is John, but they're being re-victimized all over again. And then it's like, what are my rights as a crime victim? And so basically that's what Marcy's Law for Georgia would do. It would give them equal rights as the accused, because right now the accuser has more rights than the actual victim of the crime. And we are behind the ball. We are one of 15 states that does not constitutionally protect crime victims. All of the states around us have something in their constitution and we don't. So we're behind the ball.
And if somebody wanted to get in touch with you because they have an interest in this topic and they want to help you, how would they do that?
Absolutely. Well, now you just let me know if I'm promoting, but we do have a Marcy's Law Day next Friday at the state capitol,
that's fine.
which is February 1st, so you can come out at 9 a.m. We will be at the Capitol February 1st at 9 a.m., and we'll be talking to our legislators about Marcy's Law and why it's important. You can also go to georgia.marcyslaw.us for additional information.
Okay.
And I sit on the committee that
Yes.
is in judiciary, non-civil.
Yes.
So you can always contact my office. I mean, I'm a supporter, so
Yes.
you might want to spend your time with the ones who are not as eager to pass it as me. But,
Yes.
But I'm happy to help as well.
She is, and we've passed the Senate last year,
Yes.
50-4, and so we just need to pass the House so that we can go on the ballot in November.
Okay. What about on your topic? Any message that you want to get out that you haven't gotten out?
So I co-chair the Minority Caucus's. I co-chair the Minority Caucus's Sexual Misconduct Committee with Representative Mary Margaret Oliver, and we are making a lot of progress. Put together a report, have some awesome committee members, and we have a press conference next Monday in this same room, actually 610 of the CLOB at 1 p.m. And we're going to have and hear somebody's testimony, but also give you an update of where we are. We have some interesting developments in working with the Speaker's office on some things that I think are going to be good for legislators and for the state of Georgia. So hopefully other people will come and support us. And to my lasting remark is, I think what the common thread in here is making sure that we can empower people who feel like they're victims. That's the biggest thing is we can stop this if we empower, if we support, if we believe these young women and young boys who are saying that things are happening against them, especially in a society that where you're innocent until proven guilty. But it does not mean you don't believe them, you don't investigate, and you don't carry through to do what you need to do. So if we can continue to empower these victims, I think it'll go a long way.
Okay. Any last words? I can't imagine that you don't have any.
Millennials, this is for you. Please, please Google. Use our #1 search engine and Google like local organizations that you can join or be a part of. Start something up on your college campus if you're in school, where you guys not only do community service for homeless people, for the elderly people, for kids who lack funds in education, but let's help young women and young boys and people who are in sex trafficking. I think that needs to be talked about. So let's put it on mainstream. Let's create another hashtag and let's crank this thing up and get it going. My name is Shay'na Fields. You can find me on social media at Shay'na Fields _. And if you have any information that you want to give to me or you want to find out how you can get involved, just hit me up.
All right.
I love it. Well, thank you, Representative Bruce. This is a great opportunity to talk about things that are important. And just to close out our bill HB 522, we should be having a hearing coming up hopefully in the next week or so. But on Tuesday is National Domestic Violence Prevention Day. So and there's going to be a lot of advocates here at the in the Capitol. And as the chair in the Minority Caucus for Domestic Violence, we want to ensure that we are listening and we are proposing legislation that will help prevent and protect those who have been victims. And I'm State Representative Doreen Carter. You can find me here under the Gold Dome.
And as my last words, even though my gender is a little underrepresented at the table right now, that does not mean.
You know how we feel.
Yeah, that does not mean that we don't care, okay? I am a father, I'm a husband, and I'm a friend to all of you. And the subjects that we've been talking about bother me as much as they bother all of you. And I try to encourage my male colleagues and friends to take this seriously. This is not a joke. The things that are happening to our young women and to the young men too, this stuff is serious. It's not a joke. And so any way that I could help any of you in the things that you're doing, I'm proud of all of you for taking a stand. I tease you, but you know, she has become my third daughter. And so we want to make sure that we all protect and protect the ladies in our lives, the children in our lives, and make sure that we report about all of this when we get together here under the Gold Dome.